Welcome to The Choice to Grow. I'm Scott Schwenk. Through these dialogues, we'll explore fresh perspectives and discover practical tools for navigating a thriving life that adds value wherever we are. I'll introduce you to innovators and creators from across our world who embody what it means to cultivate growing as a way of life. Let's prepare together. Take a deep breath in. Hold the breath briefly as you soften your shoulders and soften the soles of your feet and palms of your hands. Then exhale like you're releasing tension and setting down a heavy burden from every cell. Now let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody, to The Choice to Grow. We have a very special guest here today. And as you may have noticed, I tend to know just about every single guest. And that's not accidental. For so long, for so many years, I've said to so many of these wonderful, extraordinary human beings when we're chatting, God, I wish we were recording this so that other people could listen. And that's been the seeds of this podcast. And this guest is no exception to that. We've had some incredible discussions over many meals. This is Wendi Michelle, who is an epigenetics strategist. And we'll get into what that means. Product formulator and consumer health advocate. She has a unique focus on the intersection of genetic expression, which is very different than genetic possibility. We'll touch on that too. Environmental inputs and generational wisdom. Juicy. So with a background in advanced human biology, functional nutrition, and early childhood development, her work centers on providing tangible solutions and empowers individuals and couples to optimize their health and their family's health for generations to come. At the core of everything she does is the principle of generational health, the understanding that the biological, emotional, and environmental choices we make today, they don't just affect our immediate well-being, but they shape the genetic development and epigenetic outcomes of future generations. Her mission is to interrupt patterns of silent inheritance and replace them with conscious preparation, informed stewardship, and generational strength. As a product formulator and a health industry consultant, she is known for her unwavering commitment to ingredient integrity. I know this to be true, oh my goodness, and evidence-based standards in wellness product development. She combines scientific rigor with a deep understanding of real-world consumer needs for people like you and I, helping to close the gap between clinical efficiency and accessible, non-toxic living. I met Wendi years ago when I started to receive services at a little clinic, a little functional medicine clinic on Sunset and Crescent Heights called Next Health, which has blossomed into many cities, many locations, and lots more to come. When they started, it was beauty, vitamin IVs, vitamin shots, consultations on blood draws like how are my micronutrients and what am I allergic to, what am I reactive to, and things like that. And through Wendi and then the furthering of it, it just continued to grow. Wendi stepped out of that circle to go further in her own work, and we have remained friends. We connected right away from the first moment we looked at each other as I was passing her office, glanced in her eye as I was standing there in my underwear, getting ready to go into cryotherapy, freezing cold for health benefits. So without further ado, with so much joy, I couldn't wait for this. Welcome, please, Wendi Michelle.
I'm so excited. That was such a fun introduction, specifically the last part.
Yeah, I hear you. So one of the things right away is, would you touch on for us a couple of the things in the bio that might be new language for people or something they've heard once or twice, but really don't necessarily understand? Like, what is epigenetics?
Sure. So my favorite topic, because very simplified, epigenetics to me is this pocket of potential and hope. And that is so rare to find in the world today, where, especially when it comes to health and wellness, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of overwhelm. And epigenetics to me is within that, it's like this encapsulated potential. And so essentially, and again, very oversimplified, but I would say, as significant as a very scientific explanation. Epigenetics is how what we choose to do, whether through environmental choices, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat, the exercise we do or don't do, all of these different things are actually inputs that influence the genetic makeup. So everyone has a blueprint of DNA. And for the longest time, people thought, well, that's my destiny, is what I was given at birth. And in reality, there are multiple different ways that those genetics can actually express themselves. And a lot of what we do and the choices that we make will determine how that DNA expresses itself. And relatively quickly, but of course also over time and into the coming generations. So I think
Huh.
epigenetics is one of the most foundational and yet rarely talked about elements of wellness because of its deep impact and significance in just evolving as a human and realizing that there's so much more possibility than we've been taught.
Yeah. For the listener, I want to put myself in the map of this conversation to make it a little bit more tangible. Several years ago, I was gifted a genetic test. I've actually done two different ones. I've done the 3x4 and the Aperon test. The Aperon is related to some friends, Micra and Dan, who are out of Austin. And in that test, I found out I had the ApoE gene 3 and 4.
Mm.
And this became famous, this gene. I'm not remembering who the celebrity was that did all this testing in front of us on television. I think it was Chris Hemsworth, actually, and discovered he had, I think, a ApoE44. This is the gene that when it expresses, and there's a difference between genotype and phenotype. Genotype is the possibility of the blueprint. Phenotype is whether it's actually expressing and how. So just because I have a gene for something like ApoE, which can predict early adult Alzheimer's or dementia, doesn't mean it's going to express. And there are some certain things that I can go to somebody like Wendi about, go, hey, how should my lifestyle be adjusted so that I don't have to have that express in that way, or other genes?
Yes, exactly. And so that is, and it's through nutrition, it's through exercise, it's through supplementation. Supplementation is key. I'm not an over supplementer, but just based on what I know about nutrition, which I'm sure we'll get into because of my experience in the food industry and sourcing raw materials, I definitely have a unique perspective on supplementation because of how science has advanced to show that specific molecules do very precise things, especially as it relates to how genes express themselves. So, as you said, and just to expand on that, the ability for the body to just completely leave those genes turned off and never express themselves is the potential of every day. And so whether that, rather than being afraid of what the genetics show or just look to, well, my aunt had that or my grandmother had that, and so this is what I can look forward to, or be in fear of that day coming, you're actually able to choose differently, do some different nutritional implementation. For instance, for that specific example that you gave, that would be really influenced by diet. So in a lot of different ways, a ketogenic diet might not be ideal based on those genetic markers. Again, it's very precise and there's a lot of precision involved, but that's just an example of one way to do it, one way to actually facilitate leaving that gene turned off so that it doesn't ever actually express itself. And you never have to experience what that genetic coding might otherwise reveal over time.
Now, I've seen a lot of people, and I live in Los Angeles still. I think you're in Nashville these days still?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So we met in Los Angeles. Wendi moved on to Nashville. And I meet a lot of people, maybe you do too, who on paper or on social media are taking all the right supplements. They're busy doing all the right workouts. They're doing all the interventions. But when I encounter them as human beings, moment to moment, I can feel the torque and tension in their nervous system that is so intense, whether it's from, which it usually is, unprocessed trauma. Like we know more and more in this world that I swim in, that being overly busy is a trauma response very often. Yes, there's an urgency and there's a calling, but it often gets conflated with avoiding what I don't want to feel unconsciously. And one of my teachers has said, you can go and to the best clinic and get all the stem cells, the best stem cells, probably not from the most name brand clinics, but we'll say Mexico. They're going to go into the same emotional environment. So if the emotional environment, the energetic emotional environment hasn't transformed, those stem cells, thousands and thousands of dollars, are just going to take on the same quality of the emotional and energetic environment. So how do you weave that in an environment that still seems, at least to me, resistant to hearing about, oh, I have unprocessed emotional tension. Just give me a supplement. Just give me a pill. Just tell me an exercise regime.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is actually what I think is one of the most powerful elements of epigenetics is perception, and how perception is critical to how a gene is going to express itself. And Dr. Bruce Lipton is well known for pioneering this and able to see in cell cultures, actually see under a microscope perception live and in action. So
Wow.
what's super cool about it is that doesn't even have to be reality for a gene to be influenced by it. So if the perception is this is very, very stressful, then that's going to send messaging to the body to release cortisol in response. And it doesn't even matter if it's not stressful at all. The body is not going to sit and try to analyze that data. It's just going to say, oh, this is very stressful. We know what to do under a stressful situation. Let's make sure and pump out that cortisol. And likewise, somebody who has the ability to shift perception and intentionally find the silver lining or find a positive thing about it or find the opportunity in the day that otherwise might have in the past felt stressful, well, that's going to trigger a different chemical response. That'll be more on the oxytocin side or more of the more positive biochemical response. But perception is leading the way. It's essentially, and I believe this is what he says, and I hope it's close enough, but that perception plus protein is really what kicks it all off.
Hmm.
So even if, and of course, down that pathway, there's a lot of other things there's interplay with, but if that's the kickoff, well, then perception and emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence is really going to get you a whole lot further than even diet or supplementation or some of these other more maybe low hanging fruit. So it
Hmm.
seems, right? But that perception piece and the emotional piece is really critical to epigenetics, especially when we start talking about passing down genetics generationally, because we know that when couples have babies, those babies are going to also adopt in the same way that you made the example of the stem cells. Well, those babies are also adopting that same environment, and a lot of the trauma that's stored or just the emotional disposition is also transferred. And so getting that work done will, of course, change people's lives in the immediacy in their experience. But should there be any additional generations that follow them, well, then you're actually cultivating a gift that can't really be undone. And that is, I think, the ultimate gift to the generations to come is just this healed humanity, because people did the work beyond the exercise. Let's do the exercise. But it really is in that space of perception and emotional intelligence where the bulk of the freedom and benefits epigenetically come from.
For me, as somebody who's worked with people for a few decades on emotional intelligence, emotional skill sets, awareness of awareness is how I would frame spiritual intelligence. Like, it doesn't have to be of a particular form of a deity or something like that. It's just this, not just, it's profound, it's game changing. We're so focused on objects of awareness. Like right now, you listeners are, one of the big objects of your awareness right now is the sound of my voice. And then whatever your eyes are looking at, whether you're watching us on screen or you're watching the road while you listen, your body sensation, these are objects of awareness. And mostly our attention is going from object to object to object to object, never noticing the awareness that's aware of the objects. And so this, for me, Wendi, is such a game changer when somebody begins to wake up to, when I'm aware of my awareness, and can sense that, I'm in a moment of choice about how I'm going to direct my thinking energy, my emotional energy. I can seek patterns more clearly and make better choices for everyone involved. What have you noticed about this with your clients?
Exactly. I couldn't have said it, but I mean, it's very true. The perception piece is typically what I go after first, and I really try to work around, and I'll weave in how the choices of nutrition are also perspective. And an example of that would be, oftentimes I'll hear people say, well, I can't have this. And just rephrasing that to, I'm choosing not to have this. I absolutely can. I absolutely could open my mouth and choose that, or I absolutely could in my cart, or absolutely could make that my choice at the restaurant. It's not about can't, it is about the choice. And even those little shifts help to create the more, I would say, deeply rooted shifting in how all things are reviewed, especially before they're spoken. There's so much power in the frequency of our words. And this is also an area that I love to dig into and talk about, is that there is information and data in sound waves. So even when we say something out loud, there's power in that as well. So thinking through even what we're going to say before we say it is part of that process. So it starts with, what are we thinking? And then it's almost as if we speak it after that, that becomes the binding contract. So far as how it actually expresses itself in us or around us. And that is quantum physics. And that's a whole other discussion. But the point is that getting people to just take the littlest moments of their life and become aware of what they're saying about a thing, and even in some cases the etymology, what does that actually mean? But what do you know what that word actually means? Then choosing from there, little by little, it will just naturally start to unravel. And then the perception of a situation or circumstance, including perception of the past, also shifts, which is wild.
Now, I noticed that it's possible that you and I lead with perception, just the way we're organized epigenetically, emotionally, situationally. We tend to pause and sense, and then something comes into clarity. And then, at least in my case, I get a sense of the structure, and then my behavior kicks in, my actions kick in.
Mm.
Whereas I've seen so many people who, when they want clarity, they just start moving. They just start moving, start cleaning, start picking something up, start moving, go for a walk, get around. However, so many of those I've seen who start with movement, not all, it's a knee-jerk reaction that may not be healthy or helpful to their lives or the lives of others, to just start doing stuff with no sense of what's organizing my doing. How are you connecting people who are overstimulated to the kind of perceiving that you're talking about that actually changes how I see and the choices I make for greater health and well-being for myself and others?
So that definitely is an area that leans more into that precision work and the individual, because I do find, especially high performing individuals, there is almost an innate attempt at a pattern disrupt, which is and can be very positive in shifting perspective. So I would even say I'm one of those people that I might need to go for a walk in order to to pattern disrupt. Bad email, weird call I just hung up on, I don't know, whatever it is. And that's not always the case, but it is a form of pattern disrupt. So that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm justifying implementing busyness. What I am trying to present is that a pattern disrupt can be multiple things. It also can be changing the room you're in, changing the position you're in. If you're sitting, stand. If you're, standing, sit, whatever. I mean, it can be very, very simple in that way. But I have found that helping people establish where clarity is for them and when it comes like a download versus another level of striving on their checklist of things to do. So a run in the morning for me, as very busy as that sounds, is the most calming and soothing. And the amount of clarity I receive from that is, I can't repeat that in even the most solace of moments, which is odd. And I've definitely explored that, but that's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say that's the case for every time for me. So the encouragement would be, pattern disrupt is fine. No shame in that. Just make sure the pattern disrupt is for the purpose of clarity. And it's moving that person into the space where clarity has come and there's evidence that there's fruit from that. So they know when they open up their back door and breathe fresh air, although there is an action involved in that, that is that pattern disrupt that allows for the perception to shift, or at the very least for the awareness of the need to shift their focus for a second in order to get proper perspective.
So, for any of you listeners who are recovering perfectionists, as I probably am for the rest of my life, I want to touch on that, the way I may have spoken about perception and structure and action or behavior, it's not absolute. And I absolutely agree with you, Wendy, that for a pattern disrupt, there is an action. And I think that's one of the things that I'm appreciating, just imagining you running right now. For me, my knees don't like me to run, otherwise they threaten me with days of pain, but I can do really vigorous walks. And what I see in a organized walk like that or a run is I see movement, I see organized breathing, or I experience organized breathing, and then an expanded perspective, like I'm combining resources all in one place. So I don't particularly see running as, even though it could be used to be busy or to avoid, I imagine if somebody runs long enough in that run, the same thing that happens with the research about walking, it regulates the nervous system. There's something about the oscillation of the vertebrae and the gateways, the energetic gateways, that oscillation that transforms my experience of the moment and expands my perception so that I can see past my cortisol reactions, past my projections of doom, gloom, and it's so bad, and suddenly be available to the infinite guidance that's always here for a doorway that I didn't notice in that situation. Or in another case, to how to come into peace with something that doesn't seem like it's going to change. What do I mean? I had a gnarly car accident in the fall, and my insurance premium went up over 211%. I just saw this in the last week. I've been calling around to see if there's options. Can I get on somebody else's policy, a friend's, and this and that? I did the bits I thought I could do, I was guided to do, and where I'm left at the moment is making room for this may be how it is for a little while. Both are valid, but when I see that something just is the way, so the walking or going to work out or just intentionally breathing in a particular way for a period of time are some of my resources. What are the ones you recommend and experience as beneficial besides or alongside of the running? Like, let's say you can't get out of the house or away from the desk. What are your go-tos?
That is funny you ask, because I was just laughing about this with a friend of mine the other day that I was in the middle of. We just recently launched a product nationwide, which was absolutely the season of my life where I could not leave my house. And I was also wrapping up a labor of love project that was a lot of computer work and primarily research. And on the last day, when I was tying up everything and really just zoned in, it also felt very painful. So, about every hour, it wasn't even a choice. It was something I had to do. I would just lay on the floor and stare at the ceiling and just breathe. And it was what I needed to do. And as silly as that sounds, I don't think that there's going to be any, global movement towards laying on the ground and staring at the ceiling. But that was exactly what I needed to disrupt, because my brain was starting to go, I can't do this. I'm exhausted. It was saying all the things that were feelings, just feelings aren't necessarily facts. So I had to pattern disrupt so that I could get back onto what was factual And what was more important, at least was more important than my feelings in the moment, and then get back on track. So apparently that's one of the things I do because it
Yeah.
just showed up recently. But also just getting fresh air. I feel like that is such a huge thing for me, is getting out, getting the sun on my skin, breathing some fresh air, walking around in the grass, if that's an option. All of these things I've used and I use regularly. And sometimes it's also, and this might be a strange one, but I also like to text other people and champion them in whatever I know they're doing.
Oh, I do that too. That so works. That so works. It's for me, it's a version of what I tell my students and clients. Like, before you do a practice, experiment with offering the fruits of that practice for the benefit of specific others or just all beings, and really feel that you mean it and notice the impact on I see it in my practice. So that's something I used to do, and I don't think we've ever talked about it. I had this thing when I was in a tough spot, I would text 10 people something specific to each one of them that I appreciated and valued about them, and really
Yeah.
mean it. And I would feel so different after doing that. I mean, if we look at just probably under an fMRI, what's going on with people when we are doing, what centers of the brain are lighting up when we're appreciating a person, a place, or a thing, really sinking into that. It's totally different. It's totally different signals to the genes.
Yes. Yeah. And I what I love about that too is that and I hear this from clients and I hear this from friends, especially in the last couple of years, is the feeling of being alone in a thing, especially people who are building something in the process of growth, whether professionally or personally or both, feeling alone, even though there's people around them. And it's really easy to spin on that for a while about how lonely this is or how hard this is. And so when I'm reaching out to other people and I'm championing them, I'm reminded that other people feel the same way about me. And it's irrelevant as to whether or not I'm actually getting a text from them or affirmation from them, because there was a long time, and sometimes I'll look at the last time I might have texted that person, and I realize I think about them all the time. I just haven't told them that. And
Oh,
so there's this reality of we really are all championing each other, especially people that we've had in our lives for years upon years upon years, and we can hop on a call and pick right back up again. Just because they haven't reached out doesn't mean that their thoughts aren't there or they aren't championing us or supporting us through things. So I feel like that is probably one of the most powerful pattern disrupts and also opportunities to shift perspective and also self soothe in a way
yeah.
that is, I don't know that it would necessarily belong in that classification, but in some ways it does feel that way, where I'm like, I feel better because I'm reminded of the bigness of all of this and not that small, tiny peephole I was viewing this through before I sent those
Well, that
texts.
bigness, when I touch it, and I'm touching it right now just listening because we're in a shared space, when I touch that bigger view, that bigger thing, it's not just an intellectual thing, it changes how my body feels. And then I'm less likely to have an act on cravings that are going to reduce my body's aliveness, whether it's recreational sugar, whether it's some sort of drug or alcohol, whether it's unskillful relationships. Like, when I'm receiving nourishment by giving it or just soaking it in rest and staring at the ceiling and remembering that I don't have to earn the right to rest and
Mhm.
how productive rest is. When I'm doing that, I make healthier choices and I have clearer sense, even if I haven't read the science, like, don't order that or don't eat that, eat this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
I love that.
Hmm. I'm having a feeling to see where we could go with a particular area because I hear so much research on the proliferation of anxiety worldwide amongst humans and even showing up in domesticated pets, which I believe is them taking it on and trying to help heal the anxiety in the humans. This proliferation, the woman teacher who trains me deeply was saying to me in a one-on-one call recently that she's seen in the last 5 years, last 10 especially, but even more so in the last five, people presenting with trauma.
Mm.
And so I'm very interested in resources that are actionable that people could actually begin with today, and some that they could work with over time without having to empty out their entire pocketbook or their entire life savings and not know if it's going to work. Like, what do we pay attention to rewire our systems to not be in that high sympathetic tone all the time, that hyper fight or flight, and to be able to rest and appreciate beauty and enjoy human connection? Like, what do we look at nutritionally? What do we look at behaviorally that's reachable for us?
There's so many different tools and resources around, especially in the wellness space, that are helpful. And I would say the first step is reframing how some of these things are looked at, because a lot of them have become more of a subject of marketing than what they were intended to be, which is opportunities for healing. So diet, for example, most people hear that word diet and they're immediately like, well, I don't need to lose weight, or I feel fine. And those are all just those responses are a byproduct of the marketing that has gone into diet for decades. So step one would be get very curious about what things actually are. At least allow for the curiosity that things aren't exactly as they seem, and also become aware of the instant responses to very simple things like diet, biohacking, uh, supplements. Even as I say those things, become aware of what is the first thing that pops up when I say supplements. And I would say probably a lot of people listening are like, I hate taking pills, or I have too many supplements and I don't even know what they're for. And those are all legitimate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what supplementation was intended to do. So that would be step one, because that's going to open up the door for a lot more perspective on what would be the lowest hanging fruit to choose to help to just recalibrate that autonomic nervous system of the flexibility between a parasympathetic state and a sympathetic state, which a lot of people also don't even know that's a thing. I
Yeah. Or
forget
even
some.
what those words even mean. So would you just kind of in layman's terms share with
Yeah.
us?
Yes. So your parasympathetic state is, very simple terms, rest and digest. So that is the state of your autonomic nervous system. And your autonomic nervous system is, just think it's automatic. Your heart, your lungs, these are things that your body is going to do for you without you having to activate them. They are just automatically happening. So are these two states: parasympathetic, rest and digest, and your sympathetic state, which is more of that fight or flight, where most people, for majority of their lives, especially in today's world, live. And so much so that there's a lot of people who may not have even fully experienced in their awake moments what sympathetic feels like. And it's oftentimes people will start to heal and then they'll say, wow, Wendy, I feel really sleepy. I think there might be something wrong. Or your body has just shifted to where you're actually relaxed and you haven't felt that way for a while, which is a possibility. I'm not saying that it's
Uh,
exactly it, but let's leave that on the table as a possibility. So that is the difference between those two states. Autonomic nervous system, it's going to do it anyway. It's doing it based on, especially that flexibility between those two is also a lot of the inputs also going to be derived from perception, and then a lot of it wired from childhood. So a lot of it from, I don't know why I always feel so rushed in the morning. I own my own business and I can do whatever I want. And then suddenly you remember that from the time your mom came in to wake you up to the time you had to reach the school bus, it was this high level of anxiety in the atmosphere around rushing to get out the door in time. Now, as a child, depending on which age we are at the time, we might not actually know. If we're under 7, let's say, that's just we're more of a hypnotic state. Over 7, we're actually consciously involved in that. But regardless, it's in the atmosphere and we're just experiencing it. So that can also just show up as an adult and we don't even really know why. And we're in this sympathetic state and we didn't even voluntarily do that. We just were primed for that. So the ability to go back and forth between those two is going to be a huge help to reducing anxiety, because then you can also identify it. I'm able to identify when I'm feeling more pressure than is necessary for a project, when I'm unable to relax, or I feel like suddenly there's this expectation of performance or an expectation of proving myself to someone. Those are all sympathetic state responses that I've learned about myself throughout just time observing it. So the awareness of that, the knowledge of that is going to be key. And then I'll move to diet just to give a couple other opportunities for people. I think that one of the most effective and easiest ways to eat for reducing anxiety is to eat food that's alive. So fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, something fresh that has enzymes and all the micronutrients and all the cofactors and just exactly the way that it was intended, which are these little encapsulated opportunities for the body to grab hold of something that they need, because anxiety a lot of times is a deficiency, or it's at least there's a contribution of deficiency in minerals.
Pause right there for a second. I just want to say that's bringing up for me, and I don't want to lose this thread, that years ago when I was experiencing some pain in my body, I talked to a physiotherapist who I really trusted, and she said pain is usually an indication of a lack of strength. So these sound very related.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And they very much are, and it's why I think people feel overwhelmed. I know that's why people feel overwhelmed, because there is an innate understanding that it is multi-pronged, that it's not just about a supplement, which is why maybe even that aversion comes up for some people to supplements, is because they actually know that's not going to do it. Great. So let's figure out what will do it and let's take small baby steps towards that. But if you don't have the proper cofactors for your brain to operate the way it was designed to operate, if you don't have the full spectrum of minerals, which we don't have in our water anymore, especially people who are hyperfiltrating their water, which I'm big, please do, but also making
Buy
sure
a
that
filter or be a filter.
yes. Also, please make sure that you're replenishing the minerals, because hydration is not liquid. Hydration is minerals. And so people are a lot of times overhydrating, and then they're diminishing, because it's a balance, right? So if you're just putting a bunch of water without minerals into an ecosystem that has minerals in it, well, now you're diluting minerals. So it's counterproductive. And unfortunately, that's not really talked about very often.
No, you see, I mean, I so often, and I've learned to keep my mouth shut these days. I used to speak up about it in the steam room at my gym at Equinox. Guys like guzzling water every few seconds. And I was taught, like, just let's say there are minerals. I've added some minerals, trace minerals into the water, sipping, not guzzling. Like if I'm just guzzling, I'm just kind of washing out my gut. And it sounds like, as you said, I'm just diluting the important and necessary things. So this so-called benefit of drinking a gallon or more of water a day isn't beneficial. It's just performative.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Which I wonder, and again, there's probably no controlled studies to actually know if this is true or not. So it's speculation at best. But I wonder how much of people's aversity to drinking a bunch of water is also innate knowledge. We watch children do this. Children do this a lot. It's very frustrating for their parents. And yet, if you watch a child, they actually know a lot more than we give them credit for. And when they push something away or they refuse to do something, they don't have the language for it, but they do have a knowing for it. And I would say we don't necessarily lose that as we age, but we do lose connection to that as we age. And then in addition to that, we are inundated with solutions and opportunities to do this better, do that better. And so then it becomes just overwhelming and confusing. But yeah, having the right minerals, having the right amino acids, all of our neurotransmitters require a precursor amino acid. So if you're not consuming enough proteins or amino acids, you're also not going to be able to make the neurotransmitters that are going to buffer out that anxiety. So some of it is strictly nutrition, and some
I
of
was
it
drinking whey protein for years, and my hormones were low. I didn't know it. My testosterone was really, really abysmal.
is,
And was drinking whey protein, hitting the weights, really thought I had good alignment and doing the things and resting, and nothing was happening. And optimized the hormones with support and continued to work on that, but particularly started taking amino acids twice a day. It started into some water. What a game changer. And I don't know what, I haven't researched enough, but what got me there was seeing a lot of language in marketing saying that actually amino acids would do more of the work that I wanted to see accomplished in my body than just eating or drinking protein supplements. What could you
right.
say about that?
Well, that is I would say that's a gut conversation, and we could take that.
Oh,
It's an absorption issue. So a food, we'll say steak. Steak has lots of amino acids, has lots of benefits. Sure, if you can absorb it. We'll also go lentils, same thing. And we can also go whey protein. This is supposedly the most bioavailable, easiest to break down, et cetera, whatever the other call outs are on the packaging. But if your gut health, if your gut lining is not healthy, if those tight junctions aren't tight, if you haven't secured the city walls, then you have inflammation in your gut. And so the ability to actually break down what you've consumed, whether from a steak or whey protein, et cetera, those inflammatory markers are going to always be obstacles in the way. And so sometimes a more direct supplementation, so we could go so far as even like IV therapy. Why do people feel they take a multivitamin, they don't feel anything, they go and get an IV of the, let's say it's the exact same dose, they feel like a superhero for a day.
yeah.
Well, it's not a vitamin problem because you just took the exact same vitamins. The problem was the absorption. And so a lot of that also has, there's a interplay of that with even amino acids and also fatty acids, essential fatty acids, people who are consuming a lot of fat, but their cholesterol is still really, really low, which of course then is going to also have an impact on their hormones.
Hmm.
So everything is so interconnected, and a lot of it is going to go, I would say 90% of it is going to go back to a gut conversation. And a lot of the gut conversation is because of the supply chain right now in America specifically and the ingredients that are in our foods, no matter how healthy they say they are.
There's so much coming out about the gut biome. Tomorrow, I'm recording a podcast, God willing, with my friend Dr. Alejandro Junger, who created the Clean program.
Mhm.
And all his social media messaging is about, because he's a cardiologist by trade, about how the heart is affected by the gut biome, heart attacks in particular, sourced in what's happening in a deteriorating or problematic gut biome. And then we've heard so much more about how also it affects our mood, like the majority of neurotransmitters are created in the gut. So this is a huge thing. And then we think about, where do you and I feel emotions? Well, I feel it in my gut. So if I'm consistently, my perception is telling me worry, be in fear, be upset, and I'm feeding that,
Mhm.
I could be taking all my probiotics, but I'm probably killing them in my body,
If they
right?
even still live within that city wall. Yeah.
Totally, totally, totally. So for the people who are getting overwhelmed at this moment, sounding to their ears, even though that's not what we're saying, I can understand there's people here, wow, there's so many things to do and I hardly have any time or money. Oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Let's just dial it back, everybody. This is not about doing all the things or being perfect. This is about listening for what are the opportunities that you're sensing to lean into. Because if you try and do everything Wendy's saying all at once, it may just be like mixing all the colors of paint and ending up with brown.
Yes, exactly. So good. It's so true. And that is also always been my heart, and a lot of why I do what I do has been to try to be that buffer between the overwhelm and really what I see as simplicity, and be able to talk about it all does present as, oh, there's so much to do. But if we were to just start with one thing would be to focus on your gut. That would be my one thing. If you hear nothing else today, focus on your gut. There are some supplements out there that are really helpful for this, and there's emerging science still that I watch closely, because I know as a formulator, anything I'm formulating, if it's even going to be effective, or how do I formulate it to still be effective, knowing that most people haven't quite got that memo yet about
Where do I
the.
want to look if if I'm not used to taking probiotics, or I don't even know that there's like pro, pre, and postbiotics? Like, where do I look to know the integrity of the product? Me personally, I always Google third-party testing and then fill in the blank of what I want to look up. But even that, how do I know where to look for these guidelines?
So that's a great question. So I'm going to start very broad, and then we'll narrow it back in and come back to a very specific gut solution that I do know of that you can trust, because I don't want to leave people hanging on that.
Awesome.
But from a product formulation manufacturing perspective, in order to have a manufacturing facility in the United States of America, and that is an intentional geographical statement, you do have to, it is a requirement, and it's extremely expensive, and it's actually putting a lot of companies out of business because of how costly it is. But you have to test every single raw material. So raw materials, if you were to look on, take any supplement you have, turn it around, look on the back, and you see all of the individual line items, all of those are a raw material. You have to, as soon as it hits the manufacturer's floor, before you can even mix it into a supplement of any kind, capsule, powder, whatever, you have to test to verify that that ingredient is what it says it is. You have to verify potency. You have to look at heavy metals. So how much lead is in this? How much cadmium? It's very expensive to do, and especially if you have a product that has 10 plus ingredients. I mean, that bill is wild. It's very high. So that's just step one, a requirement. So any supplement that is in a GMP facility in the United States of America is going to, so long as they're in compliance, and that will be a caveat to my next statement, they have to test that before they even start mixing. And then once you mix them all together, then you have an option to send it off again to verify the potency of each individual ingredient, to make sure that once you mixed it, it didn't lose any of the 300 milligrams of magnesium or whatever. Now, that's not a requirement. What is required is heavy metals and things like that, but not necessarily the actual potency of each ingredient. But a lot of companies will also pay for that. It's called a validation study. Now, how do you know what brands are doing that? Typically, you're going to see brands state something like that beyond the third party tested and verified. A lot of the companies that are going to that expense are going to note something about that on their website. I know Amazon is very convenient. I admittedly also utilize and appreciate next day delivery. But if you're looking for a supplement you can trust, my best advice is you need to know who's making your supplements. And this is the same advice for food. Who is making your food? Not, the bigger it gets, the more people, more hands involved, the less likely you're going to get transparent information. You're going to get marketing. So same with your supplements, knowing who's making your supplements. So for instance, there's a company called Mara Labs that I appreciate, because on every Sunday, the founder, the owner, a lot of what that supplement brand was built on, which was the story, the illness of his wife, he sends out an email that's like, here's what we did, the family and I, this Sunday. And I don't think that was intended. In fact, I know that wasn't intended to be marketing. That was intended about, let's get to know each other. And I think that that is one of the ways to start as far as vetting your products and vetting your supplements. And then not buying on Amazon, because you'll notice on Amazon there's a lot of different options for, let's say, Thorne or Metagenics or some of these other well-known supplements that have high standards and high integrity. It'll be coming from a different store. And so it'll have the exact same label, it'll have everything, but the capsules inside are not the same. So
Somebody bought me, a student of mine several years ago when I was teaching it, when Wanderlust had a brick and mortar studio in LA. Somebody had been coming to class a lot and wanted to buy me something and knew I liked doTERRA oils and knew I loved frankincense. And God bless him, went on Amazon, ordered what looked like the exact same bottle of frankincense. The second I opened it, I almost vomited.
Mm-hmm.
It was nothing like frankincense. It smelled like some sort of, and not to put this down, but like floral water that you get from a shaman who bought it in a gas station.
Yeah.
Like it was just, I couldn't even, I had to wash my nose out. It was such a horrible thing. There's so much counterfeit product happening on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah. So my recommendation is definitely start with the actual brand.
Yeah. And if you're going to go to Amazon, you're going to buy from Thorne or Epigenetics, go to their store within the thing and make sure you're inside their store. Same thing with like reserving a hotel. I made this mistake one time thinking I was at the hotel's website. I was at a third party site and my reservation was not protected.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So there is a bit more work there because it's obviously not as convenient to do anything really in a way that is presented to be more convenient. That's where I would have most questions raised if it's presenting to me. Here's a really convenient way to do this. But yeah, that would be step one. But I don't think a lot of people know the actual requirements to even produce in the United States. The issue has been a lot of imports coming in that have kind of started this conversation, or people have sent off, you know, I don't know. There's a couple of different advocacy groups that will pick something up and then pay for their own testing, and then it blows up viral. And all of that stuff I understand. I'm a consumer advocate before I'm anything, before I'm a manufacturer, before I'm a formulator, before I'm anything. I only am in the CPG space for consumer advocacy. You have to love people or love money.
CPG means what?
Consumer packaged goods.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything that you can think of, it's around your house. That's food, supplement, skincare, personal hygiene, all of that would be classified under a consumer packaged good. And that industry is so wild that you either have to love people passionately or love money. They don't coexist, honestly, because it's hardcore. It's not for the faint of heart to be in that space. But even still, while I am an advocate, there are some nuances to how things get manufactured that would make somebody doing that, just pulling one item off of an entire line that probably produced 100,000 units and being like, haha, we figured you out. We took this one capsule and we broke it down. So that's not necessarily fair either. But I do think getting to know the brands and really support your brand. The brands you love, support them. I cannot say this enough. It seems like, once a product is on the shelves in Whole Foods, they must have made it. That it could not be further from the truth. It could not be further. When you love a brand, if you see them on any shelf, buy them out and give them as gifts. Tag them, put them on social, whatever you can do. It helps these brands so much, especially the ones who are advocating for you. So then you create a relationship with them, and then you can email them and ask them these questions. Anybody who emails us about any of the products I formulate, we tell them exactly. We'll send them certificates of analysis. We'll explain the process. We'll hop on a call with them. That stuff is not a problem for us. It's very rare, but those are the people you want to be purchasing from. And yes, is it a little bit more work? For sure. But we're talking about your health. We're talking, and to me, these are life and death conversations.
Well, and I'd like to interject the possibility, what I'm hearing in all this and feeling all of this, about the relationship, the direct relationship with who's making my food, who's making my supplements, who's giving me healthcare advice, having a direct relationship reminds me of a teaching I received in the ashram, the monastery in my 20s from Ayurveda about food. And that the more contact my physical body has from seed to chewing it, the better it is for my body. And so what I'm hearing in all of this is, behind all this, and maybe it sounds esoteric to you listeners, but hopefully not, the more actual connection, human connection, direct relationship I have with the humans, the plants, the earth that is producing whatever I'm wanting to receive benefit from, the more direct interaction, I'm forging an entire ecosystem of coherency.
Yes.
Like, it's not simply about, oh, I want to know what's in my ingredients of my skincare, so I'm going to get to know Lilavati really well personally. No, it's actually there's a connection, an energetic and emotional connection of nourishment for everybody involved. And I think that's what we're talking about on a meta level, is restoring the awareness of the interconnectedness of all of life,
Yes.
informing how I make healthy choices for myself and others.
Oh my gosh, that is my whole heart. When I couldn't have said it better myself, but there was a brief story when I first got into manufacturing, and one of my first products was a hummus type dip that was made with almonds. You
I
might remember.
remember.
And when I was first scaling this, so essentially you take a very small recipe that's made with love in a kitchen, and then you watch it kind of grow up, but then you also watch it leave your hands. And then if you're involved, which a lot of food manufacturers are not, I was always on site. You watch the process. And I remember this one particular moment where it became very real to me about what's happening in our food supply beyond more of the maybe common known things about pesticides and stuff like that. But I'm in this room that's very sterile. Everyone has a lab coat on, rubber gloves, a mask, a hairnet, and I'm watching them. And this was not my product. This is very important to say. I was watching them produce a different product where they were boiling the organic chickpeas, just boiling them to a very specific temp, which is necessary for food safety. And then they were piping them. So the food was now no longer in human hands. It was being piped and then put into this big, huge kettle where it was heated more and all the oils were poured in. So now it's really, really, really hot. And then from the kettle, they were with their plastic bags collecting this organic oil, organic ingredients, and now it's going into this plastic bags hot,
Oh,
just super hot. And then they're sealing them and then they're passing them back and forth each other with tongs. And I'm literally in this facility crying because I'm watching this and I'm realizing how so far removed we are from the very food, the very data that builds our DNA.
well, say something in side note for those who don't know how heat interacts with plastic and what
Yes.
goes into the food from that.
Yes. So, especially at manufacturing level. So, a lot of people make a big deal about like, oh, don't have any type of fatty, like, so mayo should be in glass and olive oil should be in glass because when the fatty acids, the soluble fats actually interact with the plastics, there is a leaching that happens. And leaching just essentially means that they start to interact with each other and then they become almost like liposomally encapsulated in the fat themselves. So anything on the plastic, whatever chemical made the plastic, the microplastics itself in a microscopic level, or BPA, things like that, they've started to try to remove from plastic packaging. So what's on the shelves, but in manufacturing, that it just needs to be food safe, and food safe is not non-toxic. Food safe is just needs to make sure that it qualifies. So these plastic bags that this heated oily hummus is going into is full of BPA, full
Whoa.
of things. And which of course is mortifying in and of itself because this is an organic product I was watching be manufactured. But I saw them, that part, obviously I had no idea. And who would know that? Who would know that that's actually how something gets made at scale? We all, I think, like to imagine, oh, it's like a bunch of like nonas in the kitchen with big, big pots. And that would be lovely. I'd actually like to do that. So I'd like to create that one day as a manufacturer, but it's not that way. And things are just moving as quick as possible. Everything is volume, velocity, numbers, margin. It's not at all about human health. I wish it was. That's the only reason why I'm in this space, is because I'm about human health. And
I
there
feel like
has to
somebody just kicked me in the chest hearing that.
Yeah, I know. It's awful. It is why I do 4 a.m. mornings. It is why I still am in it after over a decade of just seeing those things happen, because I have been in factories that do all types of food. So name a category in your grocery store. I've been in the factories and I've seen it over and over and over again. And there isn't a voice. There isn't a voice in there representing the people. There isn't a voice in there representing health and wellness. We would like to think that, but that's not what the regulations are actually for. The regulations are for things like making sure that there's, a certain limit or a range that lead can be in, or that, certain things are allowed to be in this range. But it's not about, how is this going to affect the human? Like long term, what does this look like? Is this actually going to bring them life? Is it going to bring them sustenance? Is it something that's going to do what we're saying it's going to do on the packaging? So all that to say, that's a much more complicated conversation, but I couldn't feel just more seen as you said that about the deeper conversation, which is our disconnect from seed to our food and all the interactions that happen in between there. There's something really, really lovely about who's making the food when you consume it. It's why you have favorite restaurants, or why you remember as a child nothing will taste like grandma's chocolate chip cookies. Or I wrote a cookbook years and years ago, and people would text me all the time, I made it like your book, but it doesn't taste like yours. There's something that happens that is really hard to quantify, and we've lost it in our food. And I would say that that is one of the main reasons why people overconsume, is because they're still hungry, and they are not necessarily hungry calorically, but there is an element of that disconnect that's preventing people from actually feeling satiated, because
Mm.
we derive more than calories from food. We were designed to derive more than calories from food. And we have minimized nutrition to macronutrients and micronutrients, and we have lost the human connection. We have completely lost what was always intended to be a relationship. And I've seen it with my own eyes. And so it is very much more than that. And so knowing who's making your food, and I talk about this a lot in the brand even that we just launched in Sprouts, that was always the intention, was that we make it as close to homemade as possible, but we scale it because we understand people are busy and they need the convenience. So how do we marry the two of those and keep the integrity of food made by people who are genuinely in a good mood, which is also key, because they're touching these live molecules. There is a quantum energy. There is a vibration, whether people like that terminology or not. You don't necessarily need to understand it. It's happening, whether we like it or not. And so when people are hating their job and just pushing things through like a factory worker, it imprints on the food. It just does. And so we wanted to make stuff that hold like would hold and maintain just that beauty of what is supposed to be a relationship with food, and people can taste it.
Hmm.
So I don't know. My hope is that over time the industry starts to shift back in that direction. But the only way it does, if people actually start holding food companies to higher standards and pay for what is more than just a nutrition fact panel on the back of a bag.
Well, there are things I do that I have learned to do when there's food. Sometimes there's just food and there's not an option, and what there is to do is to eat it or be hungry, And I've learned that I always pause, get quiet. I put my hands over my food. Years and years ago, decades ago, I was trained as a Reiki master, just working with energy. And I repeat a mantra internally, but I'm all predominantly what I'm actually entering into as I'm repeating a mantra with my hands over my food is I'm actually actively recalling all the things that I appreciate that went well that day. Mm-hmm. And the difference in my digestion, the difference in the taste before and after that is so remarkable. And it brings me back to when I was really young and going to the meditation monastery, the ashram, where I trained and lived for a few years. My first meal ever was a lunch. I was there to take a meditation intensive and be there for 5 days. It was lit up, so excited to be there, and kind of a little freaked out at the cultural shock, mm-hmm. Indian tantric ashram placed in the US. And I go down to the bus stop. At this point in time, there were 3 campuses. So where the food place was, named after the goddess of plenitude, Annapurna Dining Hall, I had this lunch and I was like feeling some sort of a way. And I get down to the shuttle stop and there's this one woman sitting there, this older lady who seemed really lovely and together and content. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Sure, what is it?" I said, "I don't know how to make this sound nice, but do they put something in the food here?" She giggles. She goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Look, I know I didn't take anything. I'm certain of it. And I feel like I'm high, like I took something, some sort of a psychoactive substance." And she starts laughing. She goes, "Oh, honey, that's the Shakti." I said, "What's the Shakti?" She said, "That's a Sanskrit name for this conscious living force behind all of existence. Everybody who touches your food at this ashram, from when it comes off the trucks in boxes or in bags, to being chopped, to being cooked, to being served on your plate by the servers in the dining hall, everybody's asked to be in their mantra or in silence all along the food chain. And so that's what you're receiving." And I've seen this, Wendi, change something that was kind of seemingly dead into something alive. Not that I
Yes.
would consistently choose to try and enliven dead foods or foods that are heavily processed, but we have
Sure.
options.
Yes. And that is, I got very excited when you started talking about that, because that is what to me, that is the simplicity part. When you have the choice, make the choice. When you don't have the choice, bless it. And that,
Pause. Let's just say that. Will you say that again? Because I want a triple, quadruple click under that. That's
yeah,
life. Say that
yeah.
again.
When
When you
you
don't
have
have a choice.
when you have the choice, make it. When you don't have a choice, bless it.
Oh, like that should be the title of this episode. When you have a choice, make it. When you don't have the choice, bless it.
Yes. And so even when I go out to eat with people or I'm at people's homes, people will ask me to bless the food, because from my perspective, I'm thinking about all the hands that it took to, because I know supply chain. So that nerdy part of me, I know how many families sacrificed, how many families pioneered a way for that. I know how many hands there are that are silent partners in preparing food for us, but with the most integrous, genuine hearts. So I'll bless everyone who's touched the food from the time it was planted in the ground until the time it hit our plates. And because we need those people. We
Yeah.
need, even though we don't hear them, they're not on social media. They are not a personality. They are quietly doing what they love to do or they can do. And to be able to bless them and the entire chain from that seed to that plate, I feel like is maybe more powerful than what is the pesticides or the herbicides. There is an electromagnetic frequency that
Yeah.
we produce as humans. And while we spend a lot of time talking about how negative some of the electromagnetic fields are around us, we keep forgetting we emit them too. And
And we have a transformational opportunity right in front of us with every breath to
yeah,
transform those electromagnetic fields. I mean, I'm thinking maybe, have you heard this, some version of this quote? I might mess it up a little bit, from the famous, now deceased Zen teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And he said, when you're having a cup of tea, are you experiencing the clouds that gave rain to the tree? If not, you're not really with the tea yet.
interesting. I haven't
Like
heard that one, but
all
it's
the
true.
elements that came together in addition to the human elements, like how many microscopic beings, like little critters, were involved in the health of that tea plant or that chickpea or that, the growing of the cow. Like how many critters, animals, and humans, like let alone the five elements,
Right. Yeah.
that without which, what did Stephen Hawking say? If you really wanted to bake brownies from scratch, you'd have to reinvent the entire universe from the beginning, because everything is connected to everything.
That's so good. And it's so true. But it's to negate, and this has been one of my frustrations over the last couple of years, is just listening to all. It's like, I love awareness, but awareness for the purpose of drama or awareness for the purpose of fear is not awareness at all.
No.
It is such a prison. And all I can think about is what's wonderful about humanity and how powerful we are and how much we actually have the ability to influence so much more than we're taught. And I'd really love to hear people talk about the good news of what is moving in our favor, what is happening in our favor, who is working on our behalf. Those things exist, but they just don't get the airwaves because I guess it's not as interesting in general because most people are just looking for
Fear sells. Fear sells. Cortisol is what draws us in, or I should say, I want to be fair, unhealthy cortisol. I was listening to a post from Dr. Andrew Huberman Labs podcast, brilliant scientist out of Stanford, was saying something to help us to understand cortisol differently. He said, actually, there are times a day when we need cortisol,
yes.
and he's recommending, minimum 5 minutes gazing in the direction of the sun when it rises in the morning, up to 10 minutes, not at the sun, but in the direction, will stimulate important cortisol in the morning. You'll need less caffeine. You'll be more together. So we don't want to turn cortisol into the enemy, but
Right.
so many of us have lived with, I have, unhealthy degrees of that are informing my so-called choices, my so-called cravings. I could say, oh, I'm listening to my body. My body tells me to go eat chocolate. I guarantee if it's not just raw cacao, my body probably didn't tell me to go get that. My emotional, deficiency, nutritional deficiency, my love deficiency was reaching for a shortcut for a feeling.
Yeah. It's very true. And yes, that is true also about cortisol. That is something that creating any type of not necessarily fear, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't want to make any element of the human body the bad guy. Doing that is incongruent. And that'll create a whole other pattern that we'll need to interrupt at some point too. So there's a lot of things like the system we talked about earlier, the autonomic nervous system. It operates as a seesaw. You can't have them both at the same time. You have a little bit of one and a lot of the other, or vice versa. Same thing when it comes to the pathways. We have mTOR pathway, which is a building up of things. You also have the pathway that is a tearing down of things. They don't happen at the same time. So there is this ebb and flow of the human body in which all things are necessary, but it's necessary that we understand them so that we're not calling one evil and one good. We just need to understand how they're supposed to coexist. And cortisol is necessary for the morning, but it also buffers that melatonin. So if you don't have the cortisol in the morning, then you're operating all day long with melatonin, and that's not very productive or effective. So that they work like a seesaw together as well. So understanding the harmony of it all and the synergy of it all is really what I'd love to hear more people talk about versus the demonization of this thing or that thing, in which we're talking about ourselves, and we have to be really careful about that.
One of the things in that line that I've really appreciated about our conversations over the years and overhearing you talk to others in some of your own podcasts is your commitment for helping the body to develop things rather than just giving it the dose. What do I mean? Like, if my body has capacities when it's healthy to endogenously make some sort of a substance that's beneficial rather than just take it already made and hope it's going to do the trick. Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that? Like helping the body to really be its own blessed manufacturing facility of wellness.
Yeah. Well, the human brain is the most powerful pharmaceutical. It's the most powerful pharmacy. It's constantly making drugs. The placebo effect is the most effective drug known to man, percentage-wise, statistically.
80%, right? Something like that?
Yeah, it's wild. So knowing these things and then understanding that everything has a pathway and cofactors and ingredients. So think of every end result as the chocolate cake. And everything that leads up to the chocolate cake is just an ingredient. It's the sugar or the flour or the eggs or whatever. And so giving the body the ingredients to allow it to make the chocolate cake instead of just buying the chocolate cake is, of course, going to do a lot more for you long term than just buying the chocolate cake. We live in a society where everyone just wants to go buy the chocolate cake. But I also, in all fairness to humanity, I do believe a lot of it is just because we haven't been taught. And we haven't been taught in a way in which it's joyful. that it's not another thing to do. And how am I supposed to do that? I already have so many things on my plate. It is something that I do believe if we get better as wellness professionals of teaching people and starting younger, giving some tools like these to our children and helping them to grow into it versus becoming a grown adult and then being like, well, now what am I supposed to do? Because my life is full already. I can't figure out how to weave these things in, but giving them the ingredients. So one example of that would be a real life example. I work with a lot of different national brands besides any brands that I own. I do consulting for national brands who are formulating products, and then I also formulate products for national brands. So for the last year, I've been working with a brand, Intelligence of Nature, and helping them to formulate a couple of new product lines. And that team there is one of the best teams I've ever worked with as far as the level of integrity and intentionality behind what they're creating. They really operate based on the name of their brand. They are really interested in creating consumer goods that harness the intelligence of nature, which would be exactly what you were just asking. How do we give the body what it needs in order for it to create the end result? So there's a couple different functions that they were looking to have the end result of the chocolate cake, we'll say. One of them would be focus, like a mindful focus. One of them was sleep, and one of them was immunity or a vital immunity. And instead of just going in and giving specific ingredients that would just immediately make them feel better or feel focused, it was all about the amino acids and the pathways and what natural ingredients we could utilize and harness from nature in order to give the consumer the end result. And so brands like that do exist, and there's starting to be a lot more of them who are interested in actually creating supplements that way versus the pharmaceutical way, which is here's the chocolate cake, and then the body just kind of naturally stops. It just starts to forget, or it's like, great, we outsourced that entire assembly line. We don't even need to work down the cascade of that hormone anymore because we got the hormone. It's already done. And so while it's still able to do that, why would it? Why would it utilize precious resources to do something that's just going to be delivered to their front doorstep? So I really appreciate that brand because they were, of all the different brands I've worked with, they were really strict about that. And I loved it because it allowed me to do what I really believe is necessary for us to provide people with the ultimate outcome, which is just a more harmonious, synergistic body operating in the way that nature intended.
I'm being impressed to ask you about your favorite suggestions for water filtration because there's so much mismessaging about that. I mean, I remember it was better than nothing. The first thing, and I was the one demanding it, I was still in high school, that my mom got a Brita filter
Mm-hmm.
until I learned that it wasn't taking much. I was just taking some of the chlorine out, which was wonderful to take that out. But it didn't mean that the water didn't have heavy metals that were problematic. Bacterias. Now we're talking about the proliferation of pharmaceuticals in our water supply, microplastics, and things like this. So I've been using, was Berkey, now that it's different company, Boru, for a few years. But some people talk about, saying only reverse osmosis or only this, or what have you seen in your studies?
I see benefits to anything that's not tap water. So I'm going to start there because
Okay.
I also never want to be discouraging or disparaging for people's best efforts because
Yeah.
anybody who's trying to implement their knowledge, kudos. I think that it's also very different for some people they have access to just completely gut their house and put in a full RO system and then run it through a beautiful remineralizing rock before it comes. I mean, that's awesome.
Mm,
Very unusual, not likely for majority of people. And so I think a lot of times those solutions feel so abstract and unreachable, people give up.
yeah.
So my favorite kind of catch all for regardless of who you are or what you have access to, I like Clearly Filtered. Clearly Filtered is great because they do have one that you can install right into your refrigerator. If you have a refrigerator filtration system, you can install, I believe they have one for under the sink, but then they also have just that pitcher, the
Huh.
easy, I just want to, and then my favorite because of just my lifestyle is they actually have a water bottle that has a little filter at the bottom of the straw. So I can take that to, because typically if I go to a restaurant, this is going to sound terrible, so please don't take this as advice, but I am somewhat famously known for saying that I would rather have a shot of tequila than drink tap water at a restaurant.
Oh, I get it. I get it. And you're not promoting alcoholism. I know you.
But if I need something to drink, I'd rather a nice clean tequila than tap water ever.
Yeah.
But this water bottle allows me to travel and be at the airport and put water in it, be at a restaurant and pour like that beautiful little carafe that they bring full of tap water. It's so
Right.
beautifully packaged, but no thanks. Put that right in the bottle and then just suck through the straw, and it has the filter right in there, and it removes fluoride, glyphosate, pharmaceuticals. I mean, the list is pretty extensive. So I feel like that's the most tangible, most affordable, most easily implemented water
Clearly
filter.
filtered?
Clearly filtered. Now that
Okay.
doesn't take care of remineralization.
Right.
So because minerals are obviously the hydration piece, it's not just about drinking water. I like there is a product that is by Quicksilver. I'm trying to think of like Quinton. It's Quinton, and you can get them in little packets. It's like Quinton 0.9 or 3.3, and it's a very dense. It tastes like ocean water. Like you drink
It's
it.
from Sea Minerals because they had a liquid in glass vials for years. It's
Yes.
Quinton for those of you who are
Yes.
listening. Quinton.
Yep. That's how I supplement minerals, because I know from the data and the science from that, trace minerals are sometimes hard for me to take. Just the taste is, and I can tolerate a lot, but that
Yeah.
taste is rough for me. So that's what I do. Or I love Baja Gold sea salt. It's one of my favorite sea salts to use in formulating, because one, they test every batch for microplastics. They are looking at, and they do post on their website their certificate of analysis. So they
Right
send the
on.
salt out and they put that right on their website. So I'll buy Baja Gold sea salt and put it in my water as well, just a little bit, because it has the most abundant minerals, but it also has it has a different ratio than like a Himalayan sea salt, as far as more potassium, more magnesium. So higher on the minerals that people are a lot more deficient in. At
That's
least that's
wonderful.
currently
That's
showing.
wonderful. I don't
Yeah.
mind the trace mineral. I've got used to it. I started taking trace minerals from the same company. It was private labeled back then. I think it's Trace Mineral Research. It's just a liquid and it's just intensely concentrated. But I take it twice a day. I squeeze it into something. I mix my aminos. And I've actually recently, because I went to Mexico in a real way for the first time in the fall, bought a life straw, which sounds
Oh, yeah.
similar to, you can just bring it, stick it in a glass, or I've got a water bottle version. So when I'm in the airport, even so-called filtered water, I still put it through there because I don't know what the filtration was at the hotel or whatever. More and more hotels are having refill centers. When was the last time they changed that filter?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's a great idea. I had the clearly filtered water bottle with me, and they said, "Oh, that's like a life straw." It is. It just looks like a really cute water bottle too.
Right.
So
Right.
and it travels easily, and it's stainless steel for the most part. So that's my pick. That's what I found to work for me, and make sure that I get the minerals in, and also minimize my exposure. I mean, it's hard to completely reduce the exposure that we get from just water in general, whether it's showering or washing our hands or cooking. But that's also why I like the pitcher, because that's really easy to use as water to boil in or water to cook with.
And you can
Is
see it, so it's a reminder to hydrate.
exactly.
I need visual reminders, especially when I'm really busy of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any things that you could feel comfortable saying really add no value to our lives as supplements that we're being told to take by marketing or interventions we're being told to do? Like I do get 2 vitamin IVs a month, and one of my students who is got a clinical master's in nutrition from where I can't tell you, I don't remember, said, "Oh, well, why are you doing that? There's no scientific evidence to show that those vitamin IVs are doing something."
Mm. Um, I would say that we're on a similar plane, but multivitamins from a supplement perspective would be my don't bother.
Okay.
Not none, but the ones that are very common. I love multivitamins that are derived from food. So you'll start to see more and more vitamins. In fact, the one that I formulated for Ion, the Vital Immunity, every single vitamin in there is from some kind of food or botanical. So it's not just a synthetic, it's not a synthesized zinc or a synthesized B vitamin. They're coming from lemons and coming from different botanicals that have all the cofactors still intact. So when you're absorbing the zinc, you also have all the cofactors necessary to move it down that assembly line. So if you're going to do a multivitamin or you're going to do vitamins at all through a supplement, then ideally you would want something that's botanical based. That's going to get you the most bang for your buck. Your body understands that language. So it's just really easy to absorb. It's more easily absorbed, I should say. And a lot of people, the feedback from that was, well, even though we made it for the immune system, people were like, I feel so much energy. So it's that those B vitamins have all the cofactors there. So your body actually knows what to do. You don't have to worry about like, well, is it methylated cobalamin? I had that MTHFR thing, and can I even break it down? So it's a completely different delivery of vitamins. So I would say if you're going to do a multivitamin, which people do need vitamins are an essential cofactor. If you're going to do anything, especially when it comes to epigenetics, vitamins and minerals are critical. If you
Hmm.
are deficient in any of them, you are going to see it down the cascade at some point in some bigger way, whether it's disease or if you're doing it right, the prevention of disease. So I would definitely not dismiss vitamins. As far as IV vitamins, going back to what I was saying earlier, some people do experience more of an effect of them because while maybe that doesn't have the cofactors or they're synthesized, they are still something that are going direct to the cell, where not having to bypass the gut, not having to get broken down, not having to make its way through the maze of the body. It's a direct cellular reaction to these vitamins. And so the uptake is more likely to be possible than just taking a synthesized, you know, I won't name any names, but name a, we'll say Flintstone vitamins, just
Okay, fair.
to be kind. Those are very unlikely actually ever making it to the cell, whereas an IV vitamin, and I, of course, am a huge fan of IV vitamins from my own health journey. Those were critical. I was on at one point in time told I had, a couple of months left to live, and then the only implementation was IV therapies, and then I was well again. So I
Wow.
personally cannot dismiss. I can't say that I know exactly what happened because it was at the very beginning stages of what I do now. So I had significantly less understanding, especially biochemically, of what these things were doing in my body. But I can testify that at one moment I couldn't walk and was having seizures and mini strokes, and the next moment I felt like me again and I was living a full life, and it's only been uphill since then. And I've used IV vitamins throughout, every more sporadically now. It's not as consistent, but I don't necessarily need them. I don't feel like I need them as much anymore. So I'd hate
Hmm.
to discount them or even discourage anyone from trying them, because had I not, I don't know we would be having this conversation right now.
Right, right. Well, and hopefully, science will get interested in some of these things and showing how they work so that we really have that kind of a backup. Wendy, there's a question I ask every single guest, and it's one of my favorite moments in the show, wherever it happens, in the front, the middle, or the back, and it's happening now. It's based on a quote from Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, who opened the Zen Center of San Francisco in the 60s. And I'll just plug his biography, Crooked Cucumber, which I still have yet to finish, but it's so poignant and so transformative to see this luminous figure who helped thousands of people around the world in their awakening process, the amount of difficulty he went through becoming who he is, which is so common to the people I see helping the most people, have been cracked open in really intense ways at different early stages of life. And he said, famously, death is certain, the time is not. What is the most important thing? And so that's the question I ask you, my guest. Death is certain, the time is not. For you, from your life, what is the most important thing today?
I would say the most important thing, and this is woven through everything that I do, is to be my most alive, to be able to help as many other people experience what being most alive is, because there is a human experience we're having. There is an intention and a purpose in this experience. And obviously everyone's experience is different. But what does the fullness of that look like for everyone? And there's so many obstacles in the way that really don't need to be. There is, of course, through people's lives, they're going to experience certain things that are necessary for them to be the full expression. So I'm not talking about those things. I'm not saying there should never be suffering. None of us should ever feel bad. No bad days. I don't believe that at all. But I do believe that there is a fullness that the human has yet to really get to encounter. There is an expansion of what we're able to do. And there is a hunger for that people have and they want to believe for. And I've personally experienced it. And so the most important thing to me is to continue to nurture that for myself so that there's evidence of what people innately know exists and would be curious to see what that looks like for them. And so that's what's most important to me.
Thank you so much. There are so many things that my very curious brain awareness would love to ask about. And it feels like we're at a natural stopping point for this conversation. Love to have you back again to discuss things like what to do as a parent of small children when they're pushing things away that they don't want to eat. We know they need to have some sort of nutrients. There's so many topics I could imagine we talk about. We didn't really even unpack the incredibly huge terrain of hormones too deeply and so many other things. Even just how our diet and nutrition affects our ability to form and deepen lasting, loving relationships. So, Wendi, with all of my heart, thank you for being here, being so fully you. Thank you for all the things you've gone through as a woman, as a mother, as a creator that we'll never know about, the sacrifices you've made to be able to share this wisdom in a way that has energy and possibility for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for doing what you're doing. These conversations are so critical. So thank you for making space for it and saying yes.
So as has become our custom in the show, we're going to take about 10 seconds together just to be together in silence. There's no right experience to have. Notice whatever you notice. And I'll encourage, like you heard me say in the beginning, intro to the podcast, just soften the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands like you're opening imaginary fists with your mind. Let the breath come in sweetly and let it go out long. And we'll just be together in this way for about 10 seconds. Loving the episode? Click to follow, like, and share it as widely as possible. Want to go deeper with the choice to grow? Explore the show notes. You'll find links there for going deeper with our guests, as well as how to work with me in the work of waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to join you in the next episode.